Hello, I'm Mantastic'c and Fantastic, and today I'm going to talk about the June-August Bride Rare Machine event that has gone live in North America. So, regardless of what the name is actually called, this is the Wedding Collab. And as a whole, these types of seasonal events tend to be underwhelming affairs, mostly because they are so old. Many of these cards have existed since nearly the inception of Pad, and even though Gung-Ho does try to buff them every once in a while, they tend to give minimal love to bottom rarity cards, especially over the course of many years. And the fact that we have 4-star cards still in this event is kind of disheartening. 55% of the rolls or so, or half or whatnot, are going to be 4 or 5-star cards, which have minimal value. And for the purpose of this video, I'm just going to be going over all the cards, at least briefly, at least highlighting what I think could be their strongest form. But as a general blanket statement, it is not a good place to roll. The collateral benefits of rolling, like basically if you miss the chase cards, what you get otherwise tends to be underwhelming. You don't want to get many of these Sopdets. Like Sopdet was never a fun spawn in Arena 1. She's not a good thing to roll now either, sadly. So that being said, let's just take a look at the cards, and I'm going to start at the bottom rarity because, at least in my head, a lot of times the biggest motivation for whether or not to roll is the bottom rarity. If it's good, the bottom rarity, I don't mind rolling because those are like the collateral benefits or like the misses, and getting a good miss is meaningful. So without further ado, let's take a look at the 4-star cards. So Wedding Sopdet, like I can't find really much use aside from color cheesing. Like I've never cheesed any dungeon, like maybe aside from no, I didn't really, when I think about it, like maybe Rainbow Keeper when I first started the game, but it wasn't really cheesing. It was kind of just like using Lucifer and something else. But like either way, the point is, if you do color cheesing and you have ways to change the enemies to light attribute, Wedding Sopdet is definitely a viable option. But aside from that, it's not going to have any merits for you, especially if you don't have any way to change the enemy's attribute to light. The weapon assist, these are not Team RCVs. These are just regular RCV Awakenings. And Team RCV gives significantly more benefits. So like maybe if you're desperate for a follow-up attack, sure, but it's just something I would get and I feel like I would never really truly utilize aside from that cheesing. Wedding is an Ami. I wrote an article years ago when she first came out saying that this is a great card. We should all roll for her. And it was actually true at that point in time. Like she gave passive damage, and that was the greatest thing, and like a low cooldown as well. So like back then, this was great. Fast forward, I don't know how many years now, it's nothing at all. And her weapon assist is just 1 team health and a bunch of HPs. Like there are better ways to score or secure HP on your team. It's just something that's just not going to have any merits. Again, another 5-star that's just really sad. Wedding Cano, these are like, are they 5 stars? They are 5-star base. So like I guess a little bit better than 4-star, but like I never found any relevant use for their base form, really. Their weapon assist, like you could say, like, well, that enhanced hard orb is kind of cool, and the rose might help Nautilus, but you have to think, where can I actually stick this weapon onto a given team? Like, what weapon are you willing to give up? Like, Alino is the one who probably wants to have this weapon because of her high RCV stat, but is this really an active skill you want to overcharge? Is this going to outpace the other options? Hard to say. Like, for myself, my Alina, like, my Nautilus team heals enough at least, and, like, I don't know, like, I feel like it's just hard to find a true justified use for this weapon assist, because if this does charge up, it's not an active skill you actually want to have. The same thing you can argue for the blue one, but like maybe it has a bit more relevance possibly on Natsuro teams because they do want those enhanced hard orb awakenings. Like more is good because that's more damage to them. And the rose are nice. So it's not a terrible thing, but it's not bind immune. And like I feel like again it might be difficult to find a spot to stick on because Natsuro teams like they want to have like bind immune on their like Natsuros because they're vulnerable to bind. So you definitely want to cover that. So this doesn't do that, unfortunately. And then their base form is basically the same as the green one. Like a lot of these auto heals, like maybe you could do weird silly things with a special latents, but like I feel like it's a big stretch. For Wedding Akachi, again, a card that used to be truly meaningful, but like I can't really find a true place to use a 1 skill boost card with no personal damage. Like it's just not something that's gonna happen. Back then this active was way bit cooler because orb changers were actually the best thing because there was very few mechanics in Pad, but now it's an orb changer that still makes hearts and light and enhances your light orbs, which is cool I guess. But the 50% damage reduction shield you could argue has some merits, but as a sub I couldn't justify bringing them. As a weapon assist, like these are I guess awakenings, but like Cloud Resist is really on like a lower priority nowadays. Like if you're playing through Shura 3, Shura 2, and Shura 1, you really don't need Cloud Resist. So like the 3 biggest dungeons that you want to possibly play, it has lower value. And then Super Follow-Up Attack is an awakening that has hardly any usage as well. So I feel like it was just hard to justify utilizing this weapon assist. Maybe if this weapon assist had meaningful awakenings, you could justify it because it's at least an orb generator with a shield, and a shield is actually needed. So I feel like they just fall flat, sadly. Wedding Raw, like their base form is a high skill boost fixed button damage card. Like more of these are great for farming purposes. This is definitely meaningful. And like there are 4 skill boosts, potentially 5. That cross awakening is probably not going to have much value because you're probably just buttoning. They don't have a dungeon boost, which is unfortunate, but their weapon might be meaningful. It's a skill boost with the same button active skill. Buttoning through easy content is the fastest way to clear stuff because there's the the least amount of animation. It's an option. It's never bad to have. Like if you're gonna get duplicates, duplicate raws are not a bad thing necessarily. For Bastet, in her base form, I really can't find much use for utilizing this base form, but her weapon assist, it has a cross awakening. And at this point in time, cross awakenings are still quite rare. And having one on a given team is actually quite nice because it allows you to clear sticky blinds. And it's also a 2.5 times personal damage bump for the owning card, assuming you don't have to make other patterns. So not a terrible thing, but you need to be mindful of the fact that it's got a tremendously low cooldown. The cloud resist is probably going to go to waste as well, but if you need a cross awakening somehow, there are not many options, so I still give it a bit more unique edge overall. Now we jump to the 7-star cards, so a little bit more exciting, but again, the odds of rolling these are significantly lower as well. So, Wedding Persephone. In her base form, these TPAs, like TPA does get buffed in the future, but there's no way to truly utilize a card of just 2 TPAs. But her weapon assist has merits. The weapon assist gives you 3 turns of color absorb countering. And we all know that color absorb is a problematic thing. Like it's going to happen in Shura 1. It's going to happen in Shura 2 half of the time. And Shura 3, it does happen a large chunk of the time as well. So having a way to counter this is meaningful. Even AA4 has color absorb at least a couple of times if I'm not mistaken. So it's not a bad thing to have multiple turns because it can persist throughout multiple floors. Or if you're playing Yomi Dragon in AA4, you need 2 turns anyways. So a useful active skill, and it changes fire and hearts to dark. Losing heart orbs may be problematic, but at least you're probably going to guarantee yourself enough damage to actually sweep the floor, so not terrible in that regards either. It gives you the enhanced dark combo, which is bonus damage. Skill bind resist, which may or may not be relevant. Not many dark teams are struggling for skill bind resist aside from the poison leader from the fairies, but then that's just kind of a weird niche team either way. Point of the matter is, I think it's a reasonable weapon assist. Like, I don't know if I use it that often, but it's just nice to have available. For Satsuki and their weapon assist, well, let's just look at their base form. They have some TPAs, they have VDP, confusing mix of awakens. They usually get a 10 combo, so they could do actually respectable amounts of personal damage, but I just find it difficult to decide where we want to use them. Monolight is either going to be like Phyllis and making crosses, or like Ferrule, Gung-Ho, Zeus, who like to make rows. TPAs are not included in those patterns, so I feel like it's just a little bit of an awkward thing overall. And their weapon assist is a bunch of orb enhances, a single TPA, and haste, and hazard changing. So like changing hazards and water to light with 1 turn haste is not terrible. It's okay. Maybe in in Shura 2 when you have Oku's preemptive full poison board, you can change the all the way to light orbs. Not a terrible thing. Might be situationally helpful. The 1 TPA is a little awkward. Like we have double TPA weapons, and TPA will get a buff in the future to make it at least much more competitive. Still not the greatest awakening overall, but it does get a little stronger, but 1 awakening I think is a little hard. Wedding Panera received a surprising new evolution, I feel, in buffs, and like I'm just going to look at her newer evolved form because it's quite meaningful. You have 4 skill boosts, and you could have potentially double 10 combo. 25 times personal damage is always amazing. Like, it's a great candidate for your double damage cap latent, but the problem is you are rainbow oriented, and rainbow is just struggling because voids are problematic. You could use the VDP latent, but that's the opportunity cost of not double damage capping them. Like, I want to do more damage, but I can't deal with voids, or I could deal with voids and do less damage. Just an awkward place. And even her active skill doesn't solve that. It gives you 2 turns of damage and color absorb, and then 2 turns of orb movement time. 2 turns of damage and color absorb is nice, but at least at this point in time, dungeons are built that don't favor this type of active skill. Because if we're looking at Shura's 1, 2, and 3, Shura 1, they have multiple damage or color absorb spawns spaced out, so the 2 turns won't be meaningful. In Shura 2, you only need 1 turn of color absorb, possibly if Blue Sharia spawns, 50-50 chance. So really low priority there. And then in Shura 3, you do need 2 turns of damage absorb on floor 6, if I'm not mistaken. It's that purple carbuncle. And then you might get a color absorb later on for the Gore Chaos, can't pronounce their names. So like, you might think, well, that could be useful there. But the thing is, it's the base skill that has no extra benefits. So later on in the dungeon, if you don't get the faces absorbing, like there are multiple ways to deal with those faces. A single turn of delay will counter the faces because their absorbs will run out before they execute you. As soon as they run out, you can kill them. And then if that's the case, you're just left with an active skill that doesn't actually accomplish anything. Like, you tend to inherit your damage absorb counter for Shura 3, and then like you have some either delay or like a natural color absorb somehow for the faces. Point of the matter is, I feel like it's just going to be awkward to truly take advantage of her. Like, it is a strong card. You have God Killer and Devil Killer as well. 2 highly relevant awakenings, but I feel like it's just difficult to take advantage of them. And the fact that like Rainbow is awkward, I think it's problematic. Maybe you could argue that we'll just use them on mono light teams, but again, that active skill, like I said, may not be the best thing to bring because, I don't know, it's just hard to work around. It's an incredibly high cooldown. You can't really inherit a delay over top of it either to help you transform. I think it's just an awkward place, mostly because Rainbow doesn't really function that well. As a leader, these are big, thick multipliers, but you have a fixed 8-second movement time, so 7x6 is probably not ideal. You have to use balance type cards, and you need 4 more colors, which is Rainbow naturally, but you have no damage reduction. And no damage reduction is definitely problematic. Like, Natsuro only really functions as a non-damage reduction leader because they have Velkhana as a pairing. And Velkhana just happens to be a monstrous amount of effective health, so it kind of offsets that with their big shield. Panera doesn't give as much health as Natsuro, so I think it's just in a bit of an awkward place. I think it's strong, but it's just going to be hard to take advantage. For their weapon, I think the weapon is probably where you're going to get a bit more value out of it because it's similar to the Boar helmet or other like spicier 2-turn damage and color absorb solutions because you get 2 turns of though like damage and color absorbs being countered, and it's an 18 turn cooldown, so a little faster, which is nice. You get 2 team health awakenings, which is meaningful. Boar helmet also has 2 team health, but instead of a skill boost, you get 20% of blind, jammer, and poison resist. Which one is more important will definitely depend on your team. If you're playing with fairies, I feel like fairies don't need skill boosts as much and the resists become more meaningful. Whereas if you're playing things like, say, Nautilus or other transform cards which have much larger initial transformations, the skill boost might be more meaningful. But it's the same bulk, and they are an Orb Skin card. Or no, they're an Orb Skin card? I can't remember. Maybe they are. Are they? Let me double check. But Panera is not an Orb Skin card, so you can't directly purchase her. You can't roll. You have to roll her, so that's going to be a little sad. That's a little awkward. You can't trade for her either. So, like, I think it's a nice weapon overall. Definitely strong. Definitely has merits, but it's just hard to acquire. And again, I don't recommend rolling in this event. Next is Kulia, or Julia with a K. She has incredible damage against dragon-type spawns, and it's borderline excessive. You're guaranteeing to cap. Definitely going to double cap, but you don't have damage against any other spawn. And this is kind of like what happened to me with Klaus. I have Klaus. I invested heavily into him. I didn't end up using him because I realized his damage is too restricted. It's not reliable enough against other spawns. And this is definitely where I feel like Kulia will have a bit of issues. But at the same time, she has an advantage over Klaus. She gives you movement time buff and an attack buff on a 3-turn cooldown. Even if the attack buff is going to be an insignificant buff, it overrides any debuff. And it's still a small buff regardless because they do have 3 dragon killers. You're going to get at least 45% more damage. Not necessarily a bad thing. And because of the 3-turn base cooldown, it's quite easy to inherit over top of. You get that beautiful delay. Klaus was an 8-turn cooldown. Harder to work with compared to a 3-turn cooldown. So still reasonably strong. And you also get a super resist. You could have 4 skill boosts. Not a bad card overall. But again, problem is, and not acquirable without rolling. I definitely feel it's going to be a bit of their downfall, but still a reasonably strong card. You come with an L, quite a nice array of stuff. Like if you are struggling to kill dragons, definitely a nice inclusion on a given team. For their weapon assist, it gives a dragon killer. So like Killers are still reasonably rare, so it's nice. Clouders, like I've mentioned, has definitely gone down in terms of overall value, but not horrible. Their active skill retains the same, and can be a little underwhelming for a weapon assist. Maybe if you're desperate for those buffs, sure, but 8 to 3 turn cooldown might be difficult to work around with. Next is Elsha, still a 7-star card. You have to roll them, not Orb Skin nor Monster Exchangeable. They come with 3 turns of haste in their base form. So haste is beautiful for multi-transform cards because after you do the first transform, you have to wait X number of turns to do the second transform to when you get to your best form. And skill boosts don't help you with the second transform. Delays and haste do. So Elsha is still a 3 effective skill boost card. Even if you only transform once, you still get the 3 effective skill boosts. But if you transform multiple times, it's great because after that first transform, you're much closer to the second one. So I like that. And then after they transform, they get super blind resist. They're fully bind immune. They have some movement time, 777 combo, so modest damage. And then they have 3 enhanced water combos. So the whole team is going to be dealing significantly more damage, and I like that. And in terms of the active skill, you get 1 turn of damage, void, shield effects. So basically, you don't have to VDP. It's nice for herself because she didn't have VDP. Maybe, depending on the team you're playing, VDPing might be awkward, or maybe you don't even have the orbs to do so, or maybe whatever. Like, you just have the option of piercing through that void, which could be potentially helpful, but it is a bit of a long cooldown at 14 turns. But then you get RCV and orb movement time buff. So depending on the team you bring, if you don't run Norza, for instance, for blue, you have Natsuro. This can be a way to cover RCV and healing, but the cooldown is terribly long, which I definitely feel is a bit of a drawback, but still a nice card overall, I feel. I'm not sure if I were to roll them, how I could include them on a given team, but it's nice to have options, but I feel like it's not going to necessarily change your life that magically. And their weapon assist gives you 2 turns of void, damage, void. And this is still reasonably situational. Like, most teams tend to have enough VDP damage, but if you're farming through content and you're just swiping stuff away, being able to ignore voids for 2 turns might actually be meaningful. And then you also get 2 turns of attribute absorb cancellation with an L and enhanced water combo. So reasonable awakenings if you're mono water. It does give you a counter to color absorb, which is oftentimes needed. The void, damage, void is a bit more situational, but in Shura 2, Gills has a big meaty amount of void. Like, he's a VDP. You need VDP to hurt him truly, but you can bypass that. Might be helpful. And again, the color absorb is always a nice backup against blue Sharius. Now we come to Orb Skin Cards. So the next 3 cards you can potentially directly purchase if that is of interest to yourself. I wouldn't recommend purchasing Izanagi. They do have strong personal damage from below half health. They can cut their health. They do have large amounts of attack multiplier, and you need to connect 5 or more light orbs. And his active skill does make light orbs, so it's kind of a reasonably self-contained system, but I feel like light just doesn't have as many great options for attack well below 50% cards. I feel like dark, maybe I'm just biased, but I feel like dark just has more options available overall. As a weapon, you get that L, you get that attack well below 50%. You could argue that if you need an L on a given team, this is actually a reasonable solution because, well, you do get an attack buff, you do get a movement time buff, you also get a column of light orbs. Not a bad option overall, but you get 2 times personal damage for the owning card when you're below half health, which is probably going to happen reasonably often if you're playing through difficult content. So not a bad thing to have overall, but again, I wouldn't chase this card, and I don't think it's worth the Orb Skin purchase. For Bride Parvati, this might be worthwhile to players who do not own Celica and love to play Nautilus, because Celica is arguably one of the most vital Nautilus subs. They cover red for Shura 3, they give you an movement time buff, they unlock orbs, and they also generate some wood orbs. Amazing things overall, huge amounts of personal damage. Wedding Parvati, same idea. You have super poison resist, which is definitely new and different. You have the L, which both of them do have. You have double 7 combo, 10 combo. So that's 4 times 5, 20 times personal damage. They have a VDP, so times that by 2.5. That's 50 times personal damage with a VDP. Monstrous amounts of damage. They have a reasonably nice attack set. Not as good as Celica, but they do have 7, 7, 10. They do have higher personal damage against all spawns. You also have an active skill that's reasonably similar. It's a 3-turn cooldown, but it gives you 2 turns of no Skyfalls, which means you overwrite no Skyfall debuffs, which could be nice. You also have 2 turns of orb movement time, unlocking the orbs and changing water to heart. You don't generate wood orbs, which definitely is a bit problematic. You still could run out of wood orbs even with double Nautilus because they only change a certain color to wood, so it's possible to do fatigue, whereas Celica could at least kind of compensate for that. But if you have enough wood orb generation, it's okay. But remember, you're still unlocking the board, which would have been a death sentence possibly as well. You do overwrite no Skyfalls. You do have more movement time. You have large amounts of personal damage. Great option for the double damage cap latent. You can inherit that delay. Freya is probably on your team, which will haste back up even if you get delayed by 2 turns, for sure 3. So a strong card overall. And if you don't own Celica, you are pretty gung-ho about Nautilus teams. You want to go to the next level. Bride Parvati may be that solution for yourself. The next card is Wedding Trailo, and I can't pronounce the rest of their name, but they are another incredibly strong card and possibly worth purchasing as an Orb Skin. They are another great candidate for the double damage cap, and they have 4 skill boosts. They have double 7 combo, 2 enhanced fire combo awakening. So passive damage galore for the team. If you have Rosalind, she is going to be a wonderfully strong card for that team because you're going to help ensure everyone else damage caps more easily. It feeds into Rosalind's active skill, which improves the attack multiplier for the whole team. She can definitely take double damage cap because the way Rosalind teams work is that you're just dishing out damage like no other. And if you take the 777 combo route because you have Rudra, you don't need to worry about VDPing, this can actually be meaningful because now you have another card who can double damage cap. For my team, I'm utilizing Gillian because Gillian gives me the RCV and the movement time buff, and Trailo does the same thing, but Trailo doesn't transform. Gillian is worthless for basically half of the dungeon until he finally transforms for my team. And that's okay because that works out in my favor. And his board changer is actually meaningful later on. Trailo doesn't get that board changer, so Senri is still a problem, but you can inherit something over top of it in order to give yourself an easier time. You could find workaround solutions, but the advantage over Gillian is that you don't transform. That means you can inherit something meaningful for the beginning of the dungeon. Or you can inherit, say, like your damage absorb for floor 6, and then you just have the RCV and the time buff for the rest of the dungeon. Not a bad thing overall, and remember, she's going to probably be double damage capping. Double capping is quite easy on your Rosalind teams because damage just flies out so easily on 7x6 and all these enhanced fire combos. So she's incredibly strong as a sub, definitely gives you an edge because adding one more damage cap does make a difference, at least for my given team, because it lets me one-shot things with 15 billion health. It's just the way my damage caps work. I have 6 damage caps on my team. So if I add Trailo instead of Gillian, I now have 7. I'm much closer to 15 billion. Sub-attributes might make up the way. The point of the matter is it's much easier to have reliable one-shots, and depending on the health of the spawns, this could actually be a meaningful thing. Powerful thing for your Rosalind teams. If you like Rosalind teams, this card can definitely be a valuable addition. But again, it does require real-life money purchasing, and whether or not that is worth it to yourself comes down to your spending habits. For Wedding Sheet, we're now at the 8-star cards, and the 8-star cards are acquirable, but I like the Orb Skin cards more, which is kind of silly. If this was tradable, I would have traded for her before I made this video, I feel. Well, after you roll first, didn't get them on the free roll, then you trade. But that's sadly not the case. Wedding Sheet, you get 2 TPAs. Cool. There are multiple weapon assists with 2 TPAs, but hey, that's nice. There are more options. Why not? And she, in her Revo form, you do have a monstrous amount of TPA potential because you can have 10 combo, all those TPAs. If you hit 10 combos reliably, this is a large damage stick. Their active skill gives you a column of light, column of hearts, and then 7 turns of light skyfalls appearing. So permanent skyfall buff. If we ever get light TPA teams to actually exist, this can be great because you're kind of like Nergigante in the sense like Nergigante gave you that beautiful dark skyfall loop, double damage caps with relative ease. Sheet may be the same, but there's no place to necessarily use them. For farming purposes, I know some people do utilize them because 1 TPA tends to explode for damage. Wedding as Shamali, I feel like it just doesn't have a place at this point in time. The Pixel form, you do get 4 skill boosts, you have passive damage, you have VDP damage, but I think it's a little awkward. But then again, you do get 3 turns of bypassing damage absorb shield effects. So if you know in a dungeon that the 13 turn cooldown can come up often enough, this can be a nice solution. It's a little bit on the longer side, quote unquote, for the cooldown for like say Shura 1, because like we'll have to wait some turns, but it's not a bad option I feel overall. But like in Shura 3, I feel like it might be hard to find a good use for them. Again, light teams right now I think are struggling. Maybe you could argue Phyllis teams could take advantage, but then the lack of a unique sub-color can be hard. I don't think I could find a place to slot them in. But it does give you 3 turns of damage absorb cancellation and changing wood, hearts, and all hazards to light. Not terrible overall. The weapon assist gives you 40% poison resist, lots of passive damage. If you needed poison resist, why not? And you're playing Mono Light, this definitely can be a way to add an extra damage. For their active skill, it's the 8 turns of light orbs appearing as Skyfall, so you get that Skyfall almost as a loop, but I feel like it's not really that meaningful. And if we go to her non-pixel form, I just think it's just too many enhanced light orbs and not enough other value. Doesn't counter mechanics, it just gives you more orb generation Skyfall. So pixel form I feel is definitely the winner, but I think it may still be difficult to find a truly great usage for them at this point in time. But then again, if there is dungeons with damage absorb multiple times in a row, a good option. I wouldn't trade for her, I feel, but it's nice if you did roll her. For Roshana, I feel like I struggle to find a truly great use, but then again, there is a Cross Awakening. Maybe you like this Cross Awakening, but if you needed a Cross Awakening, Rudra was a better monster exchange in the Gung Ho collab because it gave a more meaningful active skill. This active doesn't solve mechanics really. Like, you could argue orb unlocking, sure, but bit of a stretch. Their base form, they do get 6 skill boosts, lots of VDP damage. But again, this active skill doesn't solve things. So like, it's a skill boost stick that doesn't solve problems. I feel that's a little bit awkward overall. Like, no great place to use them. As a leader, they have a large attack multiplier, but no effective health. And still, only 2 times effective health per leader, but no damage reduction, no RCV multiplier, it's just a little awkward overall. For Raijin, their 8-star has double team health, single team RCV, 40% blind resist. If you need blind resist and you only need it 40%, this is a cool way to plug that gap because you get bulk. And more bulk is always good. More healing is always good. Never a drawback there, but it's just, that's all it's going to give. Bulk and blind resist. The active skill I wouldn't really like. It just gives you no Skyfalls and then unlocks orbs and makes a rainbow board. Rainbow's in a bit of an awkward place right now, and that's going to be the same idea for their base form. Like, this card I feel like just was kind of neglected. Like, maybe like not neglected, sorry. They are a large damage stick. They have double 7 combo and 10 combo. So 20 times with the TPAs, high attack stat. You could do meaningful amounts of damage, but where can we truly utilize them? You're only 2 skill boosts. You don't counter any mechanics with your active skill aside from orb unlocking. This is not really going to cut it in 2021. We need to get more value out of these cards. We have lots of damage cards who have meaningful active skills. Let's look at Gung Ho Lakshmi, because that's I was talking about Rosalind teams earlier. She's oftentimes a staple sub. You have double 10 combo, so big personal damage, big attack stat, and your active skill gives you damage reduction. And the damage reduction is necessary for sure 2s and 3s. So meaningful active skill, meaningful personal damage. Raijin has meaningful personal damage, underwhelming active skill. I can't really find a true utilization for them for that reason. I wouldn't trade for them. Now we come to the 9-star cards. Still tradable, but much more costly trades. Bridezilla, she was at one point one of the most exciting cards to acquire, and she is stronger now. You get a 13-turn cooldown that gives you 2 turns of delay, but you have to be mindful of the fact that you make a board of lights and hearts, so you might end up killing the floor you delayed, but hey, it's still a nice option. But you don't get the shield like the regular Zilla, so like, it might be like the regular Zilla gave you the shield, which makes it nicer and more justifiable to bring. Like, the delay is nice, but oftentimes you sometimes may want to just inherit a longer delay like Shelling Forward or the Horn from Monster Hunter. Like, it's nice, but I feel like it's a little lacking in that regards. They do have respectably strong personal damage with 777 VDP and a higher attack stat, but that's kind of all I can feel for them. Their first weapon assist gives you bind immune and skill boost with the 3-turn of delay. So, a 3-turn delay with a skill boost. A 4 effective skill boost weapon assist. This is now meaningful. And the board changer could possibly be a little dangerous if you accidentally activate and kill the floor, but if you're lacking great delay options, this is actually a meaningful weapon assist. Obviously nicer if you can take advantage of all the awakenings, but the awakenings are a little bit harder to take advantage of, especially super follow attack. Her other weapon assist gives you enhanced light combo, so passive damage for your team, and then 2 team health. So again, more bulk, always nice. More damage, not a bad thing overall. The active skill gives you a bonus combo count and only a 2-turn delay, but unlocks the boards and gives you the board changers. So like, you get 2 effective skill boosts with bulk or 4 effective skill boosts with no bulk. Both are reasonable options overall. I feel like I don't know where I would utilize them as a sub, in all honesty, at this point in time. Like Phyllis teams really, I don't think need to really slot them in because the wood coverage doesn't actually help them for like all attribute requirement for sure 3. So like I think it's a nice card still, but like nowhere near as dominant and magical as before. Next is Bride Roach, and she has massive TPA potential because she has a huge attack stat. So large amounts of TPA damage can be dunked out, and her active skill is quite exciting just because of TPA and how they work. You get bonus damage for each TPA awakening, so that's like a Gemstone Princess style active skill, and then you get a little bit of damage reduction for each TPA awakening. I don't think that damage reduction will ever really add up, but maybe, who knows, in the future, maybe there will be a Wood team that utilizes all TPA cards. It's all about the TPA. Nautilus is in the past. Rose are forsaken now. Maybe this will be the thing. And then let's say the team has like 20 TPA awakenings. Not an unreasonable thing if you have one with a card of 4 already. That's 20% damage reduction. That might be enough to let you actually survive various mechanics. Maybe. Kind of cool. And then you also get 4 wood orbs generated. So like it's a nice active skill in that sense. You get a little damage reduction. Probably not useful yet, but maybe one day. Who knows? You get an attack buff. Always meaningful. Orb generation. So like I think it's nice in the sense that like it might be good in the future, but at this point in time, I feel like it's just not going to hold up. Like, there's no place to use them. Like, Mono Wood is really just Nautilus smashing, or Freyr Nautilus smashing, or literally anyone else paired with Nautilus at this point in time, it feels like. So TPA just really doesn't shine. The leader skill, like, it's just not going to keep up with other things. Further weapons. A single TPA weapon with double team health. Like I said, maybe if TPA cards become a thing in the future, this could be a meaningful weapon assist because you get bulk and the active skill is valuable. You get a full cleric-style active skill in the term, so you remove all unmatchable and all awoken binds, not regular binds, but if your team is bind immune, this is good enough anyways. And then for 2 turns, you get bonus damage for each TPA awakening on the team. So it's an attack buff or a full cleric style active skill with bulk. Not a bad thing overall, but I feel like it's just nowhere to really truly take advantage of it. But if you have her already, maybe you might want to make that weapon. For a newer weapon, it's the same active skill as her base form, so again, it's a little awkward to truly take advantage of. It's a double TPA weapon, but there are other double TPA weapons out there, and right now, TPA just doesn't shine bright enough, and we still haven't got the buff that JP had, which increased their damage from 1.5 times to 1.8 times. And now, finally, we come to the last card in this event. It's the new 7-star Bride Yuri. She has room for improvement. She has 2 regular skill boosts. So in the future rerun, I can definitely see those 2 skill boosts being smashed together to a super skill boost and another awakening that's irrelevant. For her awakenings, she has super jam resist, which is nice, 777 combo, and she can either gain 2 more skill boosts or a VDP. So flexibility in those regards, and her active skill gives you 1 turn of changing all enemies' attribute to fire. That is actually a massive damage boost for a given mono water teams, because if you're facing any spawn, you can get 2 times damage, because if they were light, dark, or blue, you will be able to gain 2 times damage, because now you're doing water versus fire, 2 times damage. If they were wood to start, you're now 4 times damage, because if they were wood, you deal 50% damage. Now you deal 2 times damage, 4 times stronger overall. If, like, this would be amazing for, like, Shura 1, where there's wood spawns at the end. It would just make life easier, because now you can probably just 2-shot the Minoas with relative ease, potentially. An interesting thing to keep in the back of your mind. For their leader skill, they have fixed 10 seconds orb movement time, so they are immune to time debuffs. And they give RCV multiplier and a massive damage reduction multiplier when you match 6 or more connected water orbs. So you'd be like, hey, I could pair with Natsuro, who gives you 7x6 and who has huge health but no RCV multiplier. This gives you RCV multiplier and the damage reduction. You might think this is great, but then you go back and think, oh shoot, I only have 10 seconds to move orbs on 7x6, and you're going to want to be able to match those rows. So I feel like it's going to be a bit of a struggle and strain. Like, I feel like I would like a bit more movement time personally, and I move reasonably fast. And it's just going to be a bit of a struggle, I feel. Compared to Velkhana, Natsuro, definite downgrade. Velkhana gives more bulk, and more bulk is all that matters. And the healing is more than enough anyways because of all those enhanced water combos, so the RCV multiplier didn't matter as much. So, like, I feel like it's just not really going to pan out. Maybe double Yuris would definitely work out because when you think about it, you're able to actually have, like, the movement time doesn't hurt you. But the problem is you need orb generation to make those 6 or more water orbs, because if you don't match 6 or more water orbs, you die. So the 7x6 board offsets that problem. Natsuro's system like active can as well, but Yuri won't be able to make orbs. Like, that's a bit of a problem. Like, I think it's a bit awkward. Like, they need to make some orbs in order to really ensure they can activate. Because if they don't match 6 or more water orbs, they don't get damage reduction. 1 times health will die to virtually anything. So I think it's a cool card, but like it's just their initial release and they just kept her power a little lower. They definitely have room for improvement, like I said. So maybe in the next run she'll be more meaningful, I feel. But this is still a unique active skill on a low cooldown. It might be meaningful if you slot them in somehow on a team if you know the dungeon is wood heavy. For their weapon, they give lots of rows and tape. Tape is even less useful than Cloud, I feel, at this point in time. Like, there's very few times where I actually wish I need tape, so, like, it's just a bit of an awkward awakening. Their active skill gives you 2 turns of changing the enemy's attribute to fire, so significant amounts of damage buff there. And then unlocks all orbs, change all orbs to water and hard orbs. So, like, it's a board changer with a way to ensure you kill stuff. Can be nice. I forgot to mention, it's only 1 turn of color changing, so you don't get as much advantage, but even when you push the Manoa's Ensure one below half health, you have a much easier time. This can definitely help ensure you want like 2-shot things more reliably, but kind of awkward. Her weapon assist gives you 3 team RCVs. That is a meaningful amount of team health or team healing potential. And then 3 rows, not bad overall. And then 2 turns you get damage absorb and color absorb cancellation, and then unmatchable effects and all bind and awoken binds on a 20-turn cooldown. Pretty cool. Like, if you don't have like the more spicy like 2-turn weapon assists that counter damage and color absorb, this can definitely be a meaningful way to do so. And instead of getting bulk, you get massive amounts of RCV. Obviously that's built most synergy of water teams, but even without water teams, that's a huge amount of healing increase. It may be something valuable for yourself overall. But with that being said, I don't know how valuable Yuri will be to acquire. It's an expensive trade, and I already feel like she's not that great, and this is her initial release, which is a little disheartening. But with that being said, let me know what you, ladies and gentlemen, think about this event in the comments below. I don't personally think it's worth rolling. Like, if you do get the higher rarity stuff, cool. Monster exchanging, nothing really is that great to monster exchange for, and I wouldn't spend stones here because most of the cards you're going to roll are going to be the bottom rarity. So with that being said, hopefully you all have a truly fantastic day. I wish you all the best luck in your own pad adventures, and happy puzzling.